Hey there, my name is Przemek, and after a break we return to our retro reviews section with this album, You'll Never Sparkle in Hell by Ildfrost. Ildfrost was a project from Norway, led by Jens Peter Nielsen, and on the first album accompanied by Jane Christina Asterud. What's interesting, Ildfrost was the first non-Swedish artist who released an album in cold meat industry. But this album is the third one, released by Fluttering Dragon from Poland in the year 2000, with the catalog number 09. And the first two Ildfrost releases were Autumn Departure from 1994 and Nathaniel from 1997. And my first encounter with Ildfrost was Nathaniel. It was when some guy sent me the tapes with some cold meat industry stuff recorded. It was in 1997 or 1998 or so. There was Sanctum, Lupus in Fabula, Raison d'être, Within the Depths of Silence and Formations, and the mentioned Nathaniel. I fell in love with all three immediately. Can't say today which was my favorite, and even today all three remain huge steps in my dark ambient, dark industrial so-called education. Nathaniel was like dark ambient mixed with neoclassical, with dark wave, and maybe even with touch of dungeon synth, and with huge dose of spoken word inspired by some of the greatest poets like Byron or Oscar Wilde, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so many listens I gave it, yet at some point I felt like the sound has got old somehow, and left it aside for several years. But when I recently got back to Nathaniel, I thought, yes, it may sound old, but it's still so good. All the memories have returned, and I liked it just the same when I was 20 years old. And as I said, Nathaniel was the second album by Ildfrost. I never liked the debut, which I got to know later in 2002 or 2003, but that synth quasi neoclassical was a bit too much, and I felt like it's too gothic for me. I listened to this album a couple of times and thought, nah. I wonder what would be my feelings today, as I realized that I kind of miss this old synth sound and its a bit naive charm, or maybe it's just nostalgia speaks through me. I need to check Autumn Departure once again. Anyway, after Nathaniel, I was waiting for another Ildfrost under cold meat industry banner, and then Zonk, the third album, You'll Never Sparkle in Hell, was announced by Polish label Fluttering Dragon. In the retro review of Cold Void of Nothing by Nordvargdrak, I was talking about those cold meat refugees taken under Fluttering Dragon's roof. Ildfrost was the second one after Puissance and their Mother of Disease, the album which I still have fond memories of, by the way. I was expecting another Nathaniel, a Nathaniel sequel, but before I bought this CD, I've listened to some samples on Fluttering Dragon website, and I thought, this may be something different than this cover, which gave me the impression like it's like taken from noir movie, but in color. Sorry. And while You'll Never Sparkle in Hell has nothing to do with noir, a few years later I felt like a prophet or something, because these noir dark jazz traces manifested themselves in Ildfrost future releases. future works. Yet You'll Never Sparkle in Hell was like leaving all old castles, forests and dungeons in sake of more modern urban sound, at least modern for the times it was made in. This is how it looks like. Aesthetic inlay on a nice glossy paper, which even today is not a standard. And inside we have some photos of some strange instruments or devices. And a touch of erotica on the other side. And some philosophical texts and sentences, like, for example, writing is not a desire for the beautiful artwork, but for the origin of the artwork, its nocturnal source, which is why we shall think of the writer as the insomniac of the day. These are not the lyrics, those words are not heard on the album. And look, it's mastered by Fredrik Söderlund at Tripline Studios. Fredrik Söderlund is a member of Puissance, so it's like one big happy family. But when I look on this inlay, there is one dissonance, because there's quite a lot of typos in the titles, the thank you section, and those texts. Jesus Christ, sorry, it's so hot that and I don't have anything to drink right here. Anyway, for example, the fourth title, Gentleman, plural, stays dead. A mistake. Possibilities, written with mistakes. Vocabulary, written with mistake. Especially, it was, I think, especially written with mistake. It's not that important. Never mind, let's leave it. The first listens were a bit confusing. I mean, each track is like kind of different story, because the first one, Undone, is like dark, cold drones, ritual rhythms, but significantly slowed down. The declamations, which sound like slowed down as well. Then we have those two beat-driven tracks, Shit Spinner with a tribal vibe, and some bizarre chants in an unknown language, or at least I don't know what language it is, but probably made up by Jens Peter Nielsen. And Nova Drops, catchy, almost danceable, but still with this dark undercurrent. I always liked that more dynamic phase of Ildfrost, which showed up also on some compilation tracks like Chronos from Immortal Legends, or While We Made from Temple of Kilowatts. And after that we have constant changes of tempos, moods, styles, dark ambient, industrial, tribal, trip-hop, neoclassical. What I find interesting is that it's just my impression, maybe it's false, that while the album as a whole in general is a huge step away from a cold meat industry sounds and atmospheres, the individual components, drones and rhythm loops, are closer to Swedish cold school even than before. There are moments reminding me of Sanctum, or maybe even Deutsch Nepal, but in a lighter and more approachable form. And while I said that all the tracks are quite different one from another, in a final conclusion it all works, it all forms a one coherent entity. Strange but true, just as strange is this album. My favorite tracks, apart from the mentioned Nova Drops, is Auxiliaries, the seventh one. It's a rainy ambient track with a melancholic piano theme. A few years later, Polish project Inner Vision Laboratory has managed to reach the similar atmosphere in a track Memorial from Anywhere Out of This World album. And both tracks have this cinematic feeling. Both remind me of some smoking cigarette on a balcony during a summer morning rain. Another personal highlight is the ninth one, Past is No Coral Moon. I had this dream. I was walking on a grass which was shining violet. The sky was pitch black, and I felt like it's not Earth but some other dimension. This dream is often recurring to me, and the first 2 minutes of Past is No Coral Moon are like sound reflection of that image and atmosphere. After those 2 minutes, these loops appear, cosmic textures flow beautifully. I mean, what a track! No, what a track! The album ends with Done, which repeats the theme from the first track, Undone. So they form a kind of a buckle that binds the album, which is my faithful companion for more than 20 years. After You'll Never Sparkle in Hell, Ildfrost has continued the collaboration with Fluttering Dragon, which resulted in a split with Polish dark wave, dark industrial project Umbra. It was titled Possum Play Falcon. Very cool title. And after that also there was this vinyl EP Two Pole Drift. Both those releases were more and more distant from that Scandinavian ambient industrial sound, and infusing more dark jazz, trip hop, maybe even breakbeat influences. Sometimes these echoes from the past were noticeable, but in general it was a completely different Ildfrost than in the beginning. Different doesn't mean worse. In general, apart from debut, I love all works by this project, but this one, You'll Never Sparkle in Hell, has a special place in my heart. After Two Pole Drift, Ildfrost has ceased to exist. Jens Peter Nielsen has formed another project, Exploding Plastics, along with let me see, Halvard Vennersberg Hagen from black metal band Kvist. Kvist has released only one album, but I remember this title even today, even though it's in Norwegian. For Kusten Mavi Evig Vike, which was pretty nice. I gave it a lot of listens in the 90s. And with Exploding Plastics, both guys got pretty close to mainstream. That project surely had its 5 minutes, well deserved, by the way. It was a good band, it was kind of acid jazz mixed with breakbeat, this kind of stuff, but it was really good and somehow maybe even innovative, at least in some parts. But they also closed their activity, and I don't know what Jens Peter Nielsen is doing today. Probably he retired from making music for good. It's a shame, I guess, but at least he left us some good tunes which sound great even today. Okay, thanks for watching and see you soon.